No Game, No Life. Volume 5, Chapter 2, Part 1, Error. Meanwhile, Elkia Royal Castle, in the study of the previous king. I'm goddamn hungry, please. Shaken gently, Steph felt her consciousness drifting up to the surface. Sprawled out on a desk, drooling, she rose with a start and looked around. What? When did I fall asleep? After you ate. You banged your damn head on the desk, please. I thought you'd kick the bucket, please. Seems the moment her belly was filled, she'd passed out. What time is it? She inquired vacantly, folding up the coat that had been draped over her back. An act of kindness by Izuna, apparently. A cute grumble sound answered her. Izuna laced her hands over her stomach, entreating Steph sincerely. Exactly 6 hours since food, please. You certainly keep a precise clock. They'd last eaten at about 2 a.m. If memory served, so it had to be morning. The young sun was unable to shine its rays into the windowless study, but by now the town would be getting active. Stutch food, please. As the werebeast tugged incessantly at her clothes, Steph acquiesced. Ah, yes, I suppose so. All right, I'll make some breakfast. Wait, what's that? Suddenly, Steph noticed the mountain of books stacked where Izuna had been sitting. Miss Izuna, what is that? Books, please. No, I mean, why are they there? Obviously, 'cause I read 'em, please. What? Since when do you know how to read? I told you I'd learn your damn script, please, so I learned it, please. Impossible. Steph's eyes popped. The matching game Steph had given Izuna that used werebeast and Amanity's script. The book for learning the werebeast's tongue. Just with that in the time Steph had been unconscious, Izuna had learned Amanity's language and read that many books? Anything other than games was beyond Steph, but so long as it was a game, seeing how Izuna had proven her prowess in an instant and already read more books than she had herself, Steph's hair stood on end. No wonder you get along so with Sora and Shiro. Steph was struck by a fact that Sora and Shiro usually overshadowed. This small child, Izuna Hatsutse, the werebeast girl even younger than Shiro, who'd brought a match with Blank, of all opponents to within a hairbreadth, was without a doubt the real thing. But, Miss Izuna, when was the last time you slept? Huh? I've had 5 meals, so, please. Trying to count on her fingers, Izuna's face darkened. Shadowy circles under her eyes, evidence that it had been long since she'd slept a wink. If you thought about it, it made sense. However much one might be the real thing, it wasn't as if anything could be accomplished without effort. Izuna had given her all, foregoing sleep entirely, just to learn Amanity and read all these books. I'm sorry, Miss Izuna, I slept while you... You're such a wuss, please. Small fries should know how to sleep when they get tired, please. Steph grinned at Izuna's bluster. Seeing a faint ray of hope in the endless toil, she drummed herself up and slapped her cheeks. First, she'd make some food, and then... But just as she turned to leave the study... Miss Izuna, in what order are you reading these books? She noticed that the tomes had been extracted in a deliberate fashion from the various shelves. Starting with the ones that smell good, please. It was a cryptic answer, yet Izuna spoke as if it was obvious. Noticing the title of the book atop the stack, Steph picked it up. Indeed, it was related to the place Sora and Shiro found themselves. Steph read the title, written in the hand of the previous king, her grandfather, aloud. Flugel. A weapon without a master. What made you pick this one? Izuna sniffed the book. Damn thing smelled like Sora and Shiro, please. Guess they read it about a month ago, please. They read it? At the beach. After they'd returned from Ocean, Sora had casually declared that they'd burst into Avenheim and get three races. Steph, having been told nothing of how it was to be done, not like that was anything new, opened the book. A month ago, that would mean that they had read it before playing the Eastern Union. She skimmed the contents, lined up in letters directly set down by her grandfather, like all the books in this room. Flugel, a god-slaying race created by Artosh, god of war in the ancient Great War. Flugel, these heavenly women collect knowledge not for amusement. This was what the previous king, her grandfather, had written about Flugel based on his observations. In other words, it was his insight into Jabril, presumably, but they do it live, nay, to not die. The inscrutable Jabril floated in the back of Steph's mind. They are living weapons, having lost their masters, lifeless puppets only wandering hollow. She visualized that girl, with her unreadable smile and ridiculous devotion to her curiosity and her masters. Where is their reason to live? Nay, the proof that they are even alive? What was it? Jabril described by her grandfather didn't remotely match the Jabril she knew. Disquieted by this disparity, Steph unconsciously stopped turning the pages and thought. Sora and Shiro had read this before venturing to Avenheim. Just what were they? Stutch, we don't have time for you to be sitting here reading that shit, please. Yes, you're right. That was right. Their task wasn't to research Flugel, but Siren. Steph reoriented herself, only to be interrupted by another grumble. It's time for food, please, Izuna declared with those decisive round eyes. Steph grinned wryly and went to return the book to its shelf when, it must have been from overwork, she went dizzy. Oh. The books tumbled from the shelf. She grabbed to steady herself. As read and unread books intermingled, she felt ready to break down into pitiful wailing. A wind blew past at a speed too quick for Steph to react to. It was all she could do to recognize the blur. Izuna had moved from the door to the corner in an instant, and now held a book in her mouth. What's this shit, please? That's what I want to know. What in the world is this about? Ignoring Steph and her obvious confusion, Izuna sniffed the book suspiciously. It smells like fish, please. No, please. Oh. Then flinging the album aside as if it was no interest, she said, Smells like Siren, please. Can't eat those bitches, please. Instantly, amidst Steph's hazy thoughts, a light shone. Just now, when she'd asked Izuna in what order she was selecting books, she'd said starting with the ones that smelled good. How had she been able to tell that Sora and Shiro had read? No, more critically, why does a book of my grandfather's smell like Siren? Dunno, please. Either Siren touched it, or someone who touched a Siren touched it, please, replied Izuna, cocking her head. Like Sora or Shiro. Or you or me? No, please. It's just got the same geezer smell mixed in as all these books, please. It wasn't their son, not Sora or Shiro's. For starters, as far as she knew, they hadn't come here since Ocean. So, can you tell when it was touched? Well, Steph fell over herself, asking. Izuna counted her fingers, frowning, and then answered. Don't have enough fingers, please. That was all but confirmation that it was from over 10 years ago. Wait just a moment. You can tell that? You can't, please. Damn smell doesn't run away, please. How am I supposed to know the common sense of another race? Steph screamed inwardly. Yet now all the riddles were answered. The point of having Izuna help her, the method by which she'd identified books Sora and Shiro had read, and the fact that her grandfather had been involved with the Sirens over 10 years ago. Everything had been laid bare. Now, all that was left. Can you distinguish between these books that were written before and after this one? Izuna sniffed and tilted her head. Smells weak, please, but if I try damn hard, should be possible, please. The world flitted with light. The scope of their search had narrowed tremendously. Oh, if you had such useful power, I wish you would have employed it sooner. But thank you so much. Finally, I've glimpsed a way out of this. Overcome with emotion, Steph hugged Izuna and rubbed her all over, but Izuna jumped back. She threatened Steph as about to bite her, her hair on end. I apologize. Did I offend you? Stutch, you suck at petting, please. As Izuna maintained her defensive posture, Steph looked around in a panic. What caught her eye? Oh, yes. Here, you can have this. Will you forgive me? The hell's that, please? It's a confection I prepared for myself. See? Eating a piece herself to demonstrate that it was safe, she shakily proffered the goods. As she extended her peace offering, Izuna sniffed at it several times. Not bad, please, but right now I want food, please. Fish, please. Snapping up the confection in her mouth, Azuma immediately recovered her good humor. Waving her big tail to and fro, she nibbled at the sweet snack like a hamster. Ah, well, I'll go cook. Grilled fish, boiled fish, raw fish. Which? All of them, please. What? All of them, please. Why not? Now that I have found an ally to be reckoned with, why not display my true potential in the kitchen with every seafood dish in my repertoire? In the meantime, could you segregate the books that my grandfather wrote before and after? Steph addressed in a rapt fountain of drool. Understood, please. Izuna bolted up in time with her loud and clear response. At last, the way out was in sight, just as Steph started to fly out of the room behind her. Something broke with a bang. I'm sorry? Only when the werebeast, growling, heart-pounding as if about to leap out of her chest, panting with close to 10 books in her hands, stained scarlet by her blood break, prodded her for action, did Steph realize the sound had been Izuna breaking the sound barrier. I'm done, please. Where's my fish, please? If I try damn hard, it should be possible. Well, exactly as Izuna had promised, she tried damn hard. She tried so hard, she picked a fight with the limits of physics and bent them by force. Izuna's blood raged, her drool dripped, her gaze fixed as if on prey. Would you mind helping me buy some groceries? Steph decided to buy time. High in the sky of Abenheim, enshrouded in the dark of night, the landscape was littered with countless cubes and lit only by the moon and the faint glow emitted by the cubes themselves. It was though all this that Sora and Shiro awkwardly, shakingly, unconvincingly flew, or drifted. Do you really have a chance of winning? Don't talk to me, Mal. You're distracting me. Brother, more like this. They looked as if one false move would plummet them into a tailspin, which was not very reassuring at all. Plum, who had connected them through formed wings, murmured, You're playing against Flugel. You may have my help, but still, it's not as if you've ever flown before, and there's no way we can win on speed against Flugel. Struggling with the use of his wings, Sora answered merrily, if only in terms of this note. Don't worry, being fast is an advantage in tag, but it doesn't necessarily mean you'll win. Well, that's true, but still... At this stage, Plum the Scarf heaved a silent sigh. Flugel, even if they couldn't shift, they were a race that contravened physics by their very existence. The trio might never have seen their opponent's top speed, but knowing their general nature was enough to imagine it. Probably, if they really tried, one might not be taking supersonic, more like hypersonic. Even allowing that tag wasn't just about raw speed, there was no way you could expect a tortoise to beat a horse in a race. Seriously, the way they were going at it, it was totally... What? Amidst these thoughts, Plum caught on to something funny. At some point, Sora and Shiro's flapping had stabilized. Gradually, their pace increased, and the wind beating against the muffler, Plum, grew stronger. Why did you have to make it so each of you control just one wing? Thinking of this at such a late hour didn't stop Plum from asking the question. The siblings, who were making the wings their own in the blink of an eye, looked at each other and smiled. That's obvious, 'cause if we didn't, we couldn't be sure that we'd win. Suggesting, conversely, that if they did, they could be sure they'd win, their joined hands told the story. As long as our hands are touching, we're not going to lose to anyone. Empty weapons, objects, mere puppets, Flugel tools to destroy gods for their lord. This was not for them, but it had been 6,000-odd years since they had lost their lord. Why did Flugel still exist? In search of this answer, they had long drifted along with Avenheim, but Jabril, who had flown off on her own and now suddenly returned, had clearly changed, as if, yes, she'd found the answer. Azrael, chin in hand, looked up into the empty space. As per Sora and Shiro's condition, the entire assemblage of the hall, 100 Flugel, waited out the siblings' 5-minute head start, all gazing in the same direction. At the image projected in the empty space, Sora and Shiro's exploits. Jibs, I think if any kid can complete the final mission Lord Artosh left us, to find the answer, It can only be you, Jibs, the closing number. There was a reason for this, but that wasn't the issue. Azrael decided as she continued. If your answer is the one planted in you by the covenants, something Azrael had confirmed, in the Flugel tongue, so as not to be understood by Sora and Shiro. She went on deliberately, her plastic smile unchanged. I'll use my privilege. You know what that means, don't you? Yes, however, to ask a question without already knowing the answer is the work of a weak will, my elder. At these words, all the Flugel staring up at the display stiffened. Azrael, the Alipententiary, the chair of the Council of 18 Wings, the one privilege held by Azrael, who was not the agent plenipotentiary, was based on an agreement struck 6,000-odd years earlier. The order of all Flugel to end themselves is not what you mean? Jabrone narrowed her eyes as she casually voiced what everyone was thinking. Originally, this was a privilege you secured in order to prohibit our suicide until we might find the meaning of our existence as Flugel without a lord. Should you, however, judge there be no meaning to our existence, please feel free. What tensed in all of them was not fear. Flugel had never held a strong fear of death. For a race created as weapons, a race that lived eternally, it was almost an honor. What took hold inside them despite this was anticipation. Something starting or something ending. Just that difference. But the promise of such an event created an atmosphere of anticipation. As long as you know. But it appeared that, alone among them, only Azrael failed to grasp this. Considering her elder, Jabril could not help but evince a slight disappointment. And that, more than anything, gnawed at Azrael. Elder Azrael, surely you can understand that as it as well are Flugel's fundamental mistake. Sora and Shiro didn't know, but Jabril, since meeting them, had clearly changed. Before losing to them, Jabril too might have felt some unease as she moved through her days. When it came down to it, though she had been more or less the same as Azrael turning the unknown into the known, in that alone she'd found meaning. The unknown was to be overturned. It was unemotional, or one might even say, an enemy to be destroyed. Jiro had been a little more aggressive than the others in confronting that enemy. The day she had lost to Sora and Shiro, that changed. The knowledge we have accumulated over the course of thousands, tens of thousands of years is upended in its whole by my masters, born scarcely over 10 years ago. The meaning, the value of that, my elder, do you not understand? With an expression Azrael had never seen, almost feverish, an expression that, as far as memory served, her little sister had never shown, even to Artosh. Jabril elaborated. The heart burns when the unknown is transformed into the known, hotter by far, though when the known is transformed into the unknown. The revelation convinced me, of my own will, to follow. It has nothing to do with the covenants. Azrael could only look on in silence during Jabril's oration. Frankly speaking, she had no idea what her little sister was talking about. The known transformed into the unknown? What could that mean but terror? But as if inspired by Jabril's words, heat welled in the eyes of the 100 Flugel rearing at the starting line, and their wings quivered. I don't get this, Azrael seemed to say as she put her chin back in her hand. At the very least, it wasn't the answer. She turned her attention to the two projected in the air, awkwardly struggling to fly. Elder Azrael, I know that you, more than anyone else, have anguished over the fate of the Flugel. However, otherwise unmoving, Azrael flicked her eyes towards the remark, where her gaze was met with absolute conviction. Somehow, as if pleading, Jabril spoke. The answer you have been seeking is not where you imagine. I can't take any more. It's too hard. I give up. Dude, it hasn't even been 3 minutes. Even Rahman has more guts than you. Plum the Scarf is already whining and getting upbranded by Sora. I'm not some crazy Flugel. You two don't even know how hard it is for me to defy gravity. And then you want me to give you wings? To be honest, I wish you had... You want sweat? I got plenty, so look at all you want. I'll never give up. For your sweat, Come, let us continue. Damn, you make yourself look ridiculous. The sensation of having his neck licked sent something unpleasant streaming down Sora's spine. This scarf was supposed to be Plum incognito. She had cloaked her physical self in the form of a scarf to link Sora and Shiro, with her ends functioning as wings that the siblings could manipulate at will. That was how it worked. It was a disguise, which meant it was a spell of illusion, so Sora reminded himself that it was actually just Plum. Hey, to us it looks like you're a scarf that turns into wings, but what's the real situation? Lickety, lickety. Oh, this is heaven. Oh, yes? Well, at the moment, I'm holding you by your neck while licking it, you see. Well, I'm latched to Queen Shiro's neck with my lower extremities. Let's call this flying in deformation. Brother, that is lame, obnoxious, and most of all, not funny. Hey, I just gave it a shot. Why you gotta be like that? A tear fell, sparkling through the night sky of Abenheim, but Plum chimed in bitterly. Just so you know, simultaneous deployment of multiple rights in Elf's patented specialty. Considering I'm not only disguising myself as a magical flying scarf, but also magically flying you through the air however you want, I really, really wish you'd say something nice. Plum complained at length. Also, this tires me out more than I expected. If my soul supply cuts out, we'll probably die in a few seconds. Sure, you jumped in on a pretty risky proposal, didn't you? But then I get to go lickety-lickety your neck all I want, sir. It's so delectable. Yeah, now I just want to whip off this damn scarf. Just as the impulse struck him to toss the scarf, regardless of the consequences. Brother, time. 5 minutes had passed. Sora's eyes narrowed at Shiro's reminder. It was the time for the Flugel, held at the starting line, to come hunt them down. All right, Plum, we're trusting you with our lives, so don't crap out at us in the middle. Not to worry. If I run out of energy, we'll just go down together. That's nice, but no thanks. Here we go. The moment he said it, Sora and Shiro simultaneously flapped hard, reducing their altitude precipitously. Hi. The plunge was so steep that even Plum, still wrapped around their necks, screamed. Amplified by the force of their wings, their downward velocity was so intense that the wind beat against them. Just before they hit the ground, Abenheim's back, they leveled off into a horizontal flight. Are they using acceleration from the fall to leave their pursuers behind? Plum suddenly wondered, but something was behind them. The Flugel, who had just started, were already catching up. It was true that Sora and Shiro had gotten the hang of their wings quickly, but no matter how hard they pushed the wings Plum had woven for them, they couldn't surpass the limits of physics. 200 kilometers per hour was the best they could hope for, whereas Flugel scoffed at physics. They're about to catch up to us. What do we do? While Plum wailed internally, Sora and Shiro calmly assessed the situation. Behind them, 4. No formation. Syllables. 1, 3. Evade, collect. Number 1, wing base, O. 3 left side. Hole 1, Shiro, 3, me. Go! And in an exchange indecipherable to Plum transpired in a blink, and before Plum could so much as mumbled, huh? Sora and Shiro tweaked their course. That instant. I'm first. We have you now. Making short work of the 5-minute handicap, as might be expected, 2 Flugel closed in. They reached out toward Sora and Shiro, but grasped empty air. What? The 2 Flugel, voicing their incomprehension at having failed to snatch the siblings, who had vanished in a blink. Behind, Sora and Shiro were, respectively, on their assailant's wing base and left side, targeting the syllables just transcribed there, and the Flugel moaned. The other 2, who followed a moment later, looked around. Having lost sight of their prey, it was no wonder, for by then Sora and Shiro were well on their spiraling path towards the line of cubes, weaving among countless stacks of die through the townscape of Abenheim. 2 syllables in hand. Excuse me, what was that? A fleeting encounter that defied even Plum's comprehension, as she was wrapped around their necks. As Plum gaped behind the spell of her illusion, Sora filled her in. A barrel roll. That's how you dodge something flying in a straight line faster than you. Duh. Indeed, feeling pursuers at their backs and drawing them in close as possible, Sora and Shiro tweaked their course so that, of the four in their tail, the two bearing syllables would wind up in front of them. And the instant Sora and Shiro seized what they needed, they stuck out their wings and just rolled off at an angle. That meant they keep going in the same direction, but in the decelerating spiral. While from the relative perspective of the two fast flugel, it seemed they'd vanished in midair, really the siblings had just outstripped them. They weren't used to using wings, and even if they'd mastered them, they weren't capable of flugel speed. In which case, if we can't work our wings, we can just stop them. Those bitches fly around all screw aerodynamics, like they know the maneuvers of fixed-wing aircraft. Even if they know, they'd never have thought about it. Around the arms of the smugly smiling pair, just as Shiro had explained, revolved the syllables, O and Ho. Plum, finally catching up, was dumbfounded. Don't tell me. You remember everyone who has a syllable, and which ones? Sora chuckled. Come on, Plum, you still haven't learned to respect my little sister? Feeling shamed by these words, Plum fell silent. Well, in any case, Shiro, these syllables we need right now, you know, right? Naturally. Okay, then we'll catch those first. It's not like we can keep using the same maneuvers on these guys after all. Roger that. Plum gaped at the pair, casually declaring that they'd catch flugel, as if such a thing were natural. It was as if they'd decided that in this game of tag, the siblings were actually it. Sora and Shiro soared through the cityscape of Avenheim, weaving as they went. Alone at the starting line with Ezreal, watching the scene projected before them, Jabril felt a flutter in her chest, a fervent sense of astonishment. At Shiro, who remembered all the syllables, their bearers, and even where they'd been transcribed, at the divine feat of evasion and the collection of the syllables, but more than that, at her two lords flying about the city as if they knew it like their own backyard. She could not conceal her astonishment. Avenheim was constructed of intricately overlapping cubes. Through the fine cracks between the cubes and the darkness illuminated only by the faint light and the moon, they flew as if threading needles. They still had a little by the way of speed, but in this scenario, a pursuer who flew too quickly would be lost. As they soared, diving, piercing precisely through the narrow alleys and cracks formed by the cubes, slipping through holes it seemed hard to imagine that even one person could fit through. One careless acceleration would result in a calamitous crash. What magnificence! But still, that left something unexplained. Jabril puzzled to herself. Flugel was a race that tended to rely on brute strength. This was a truism she herself could not deny, but even so, they did know how to collaborate. They wouldn't be much of a weapon otherwise. If speed was insufficient, they should switch to siege tactics. And yet... What? How? A Flugel girl shrieked. She'd been poised at the only exit from the crack into which Sora and Shiro had ducked, only to watch them burst from someplace completely unexpected. Yes, Sora and Shiro had foiled the Flugel siege entirely. They'd glanced at the map for only a moment. Had they learned everything about Avenheim in that short time? Impossible. It was inconceivable that one of her masters, Shiro, could have memorized a map in those few seconds, but it was impossible to divine the cracks and alleys of the city built by complex three-dimensional stacks of bodies high and low from a mere map. Then how... And at last, careful observer that she was, Jabril nonetheless doubted the conclusion that she, of all people, had reached. What? This is a joke, right? Realization dawned that between Sora's and Shiro's firmly joined hands, their fingers were finally moving. Plum, who until recently had been desperately suppressing a cry, now believing that she had discovered a methodology by which her pilots were navigating impossibly narrow holes and cracks. a methodology one might safely dub bullshitology. Suddenly found herself speechless. So presumably, not that it was plausible, this is how they did it. Skimming the cityscape that she had memorized, she confirmed that the cube's sides were uniform. Through mental calculation, she then unraveled the patterns by which those cubes were stacked, revealing the fine cracks that arose based on differences in level. Bypassing the necessity for words, she conveyed the information to Sora through finger movement alone, and Sora in turn shook the pursuers by deceiving them, leading them on and plotting out escape routes. How could one find themselves at anything but a loss for words? As far as Plum was concerned, and pretty much anyone would agree, it was totally beyond all comprehension. They were communicating by finger movement, yet simple information like this way, or over here, wasn't even what it was. Reading each other's intentions from the sensation of their joined hands, the two amenities, without a moment's confusion or hesitation, flapped their wings and flew it as if their connected palms were their very nerves. Well, it was fair to say that they had not yet completely acclimated themselves to flight. There was some roughness in their execution, but all the more for that, witnessing something beyond belief. Plum was astonished. 2 and 1 set of wings, holding hands. If one twin worked harder to break gravity's pull, the other would sense that effort before they were left behind, match it, and catch up. Without allowing a single flap of the wings to fall out of sync, they shared with one another what they had learned and raised each other up, limitlessly, at terrifying speed. The sight sent a shiver down Plum's spine. These two were even more. Then the siblings, who up to that point had maintained radio silence, opened their mouths. Left, right, 4 drawn. Left, shall, yo, pause, sell. Right, redder, not, grow. Missing 1. Collect, draw above. 12. Syllables 5. Completes, but risky. Following this cryptic exchange, a smiling Sora resumed speaking in complete sentences. Risk acknowledged. Let's get 'em. Roger. Left Shiro. Brother right. Left shoulder. Right wing. Left elbow. Hip. No sooner than they spoken. They snapped their wings, that is, Plum, in a vicious break that sent them hurtling into a narrow hole. We have them at last. Pincer attack on cue. Sora and Shiro carelessly, or so it would seem to Plum, exited into a wide corridor. Waiting for them were 4 Flugal on either side, as they'd said themselves a perfect pincer attack. But Sora and Shiro's words echoed through Plum's head. Left, right, 4 drawn. They'd drawn the Flugal, and now they'd get them? Rushing forward with blinding speed, 8 Flugal in total to their left and right. But in that case, let's do it, Shiro! Just who had who? Sora and Shiro brought together with their free hands to form a word. The syllables on their wrist moved in combined flash of light, targeting the 8 Flugal assaulting them from either flank, and the pair held their hands out, left and right, and shouted, Hollow! A heartbeat. 4 Flugal from each side descending on Sora and Shiro with outstretched hands. Huh? Only to pass harmlessly through their prey, re-emerging on opposite sides. Why? Leaving 8 moans in their wake, Sora and Shiro dove once more into the space between cubes. Navigating a crevice barely wide enough for one person to line vertically with Shiro, Sora laughed. Pause sell yo sao. How about it, Shiro? I got 'em all. Redder, bro, not, That makes 8. Each displayed the 4 syllables of light they had collected on their wrists, as if it was only natural. Gingerly, Plum inquired, excuse me? What do you think? A hole. Words work on whatever you touch. Those are the rules of the game, right? So, we opened a hole. In space. Plum, speechless, thought back. They'd opened a hole, a hollow space, around themselves, bridging the space at their flanks to evade the Flugal's pincer attack. Once their assailants emerged, naturally their backs would be to Sora and Shiro, who collected the syllables. But wait. Could it be you drew only Flugal with syllables? Yeah, but we didn't get all the ones we need. Affirming as if it was nothing, Sora looked up audaciously from the syllables lined up on his arm, like prayer beads. Plum involuntarily followed his gaze. 4, 5, 8, 12. Flugel were converging on them at terrifying speed. Ow, 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 ow. What are we going to do? Collect. Draw 12 from above, just like we planned. Don't freak out. Brother, can we get out? Sora and Shiro were barreling at high velocity through a crack barely big enough for one person. As soon as they shot into the open again, they'd be assaulted by Flugel, 12 of them. But Sora grinned boldly. Sure, no prob. Soon, Sora lost his balance as Plum suddenly licked his neck. They burst into the open. With 12 Flugel incoming, with Sora off kilter, the centrifugal force... Brother? Wah! Almost bugged Shiro, but some furious wing flapping just managed to keep them whole. Even so, the effort to avoid a tailspin left Sora unprepared for the Flugel rushing in. Shiro, do it! A split-second decision. No time to right themselves, Sora extended his left hand to Shiro, and left the word to her. Wholly convinced she'd know what he meant, Shiro grabbed Sora's hand, and pushed the glowing syllables out into the void. You shall not pass! With these words, the 12 rushing shadows descended on Sora and Shiro, and... Owie! Nyeh! Wop, wop, wop. No, not even so half-assed and meekly. Thunderously, like a shelter being bombarded, the Flugel pounded into an invisible wall. But the real issue was... Shiro glanced at Sora. They'd planned to break upward at this point. You shall not pass. The wall they'd constructed using 4 separate monosyllabic words. Let no enemy pass. Their plan had been to snare just the Flugel syllable slipping by, but... Nick, rah! He was in time. Shiro's expression relaxed. While he'd let Shiro launch the word, her brother had managed to regain his balance and flip over. Breaking out in a nervous sweat, Sora flapped his wings as Shiro simultaneously followed his lead. Weaving past the 12 Flugel, momentarily stunned by their impact with the invisible wall. Shit, Shiro! Do it for me! There was no time to relay which of their assailants had syllables. Shiro stretched out her hands, and then, hand alone being insufficient, she employed her feet, and even her wing, barely managing to collect them all. I won't let you do that! Shiro's wing was on the verge of getting tagged, but this time Sora used his wing to adjust their mutual balance. They scraped by the hands of the fiends, slipping back under the invisible wall, and just as they were about to crash into the ground, they flapped off, ducking into a narrow crack. They'd made it somehow. Shiro's voice took concern for Sora as he struggled to catch his breath. Are you alright? Queried Plum, herself the culprit of the crisis. Sora chewed on the scarf and howled indistinctly. Plum! You little shit! You really want to die with us? I'm sorry. You see, when you made that sharp turn, my mouth slipped off you, sir. Did I not tell you that if my supply were cut off, we would die in a matter of seconds? I mean, if we die, we'll die together. You'll be coming with me. That twerp, she had some damn nerve. With that, Shiro suppressed the pounding of her heart to catalog the syllables at her wrist and mumbled. Brother, we got ak, por, bar, ve, feet, tet, and din. Now, yeah, it's finally complete. Por, din, sel, ve, bar, ro, ret, ak, fit, and tret. The siblings smiled at the word they could now compile. As they locked eyes and nodded, they flapped their wings hard. The 2 who had thus far kept to weaving among the cubes now ascended to the sky. Oh, there! They're changing their strategy again? They were spotted immediately. Sora and Shiro exposed themselves, but the pursuers were suspicious of the sudden appearance. Rather than attacking in straight lines, they flew in arcs to close in and surround their quarry. No one could have predicted it. Even Plum, despite everything, hadn't seen it coming. Before the advancing Flugel, the 2 joined hands and spelled out the word. Before the 4 syllables faded, they touched themselves and shouted, Accelerate! It wasn't just their pursuers. Plum and even Jabril, observing from afar, were dumbfounded. Who would have expected that in the short time since obtaining their wings at the start of the game, not even 15 minutes, those same wings borrowed from Plum would, with a single flap from the two amenities, leave both Sound and Flugel far behind, with nothing but a shock wave in their wake, using straight-up linear distance. Indeed, using a word to accelerate themselves, they could materialize an image. They could get rid of their wings' physical limitations. Hasten, agility, accelerate. Hence, the start of the game, their goal had been to form such words. Failing to do so, Sora and Shiro would have been incapable of escaping adversaries who changed strategies according to their opponent's movements, who adapted and learned for a full hour. That's why they stuck to low speeds around the cubes, focused on drawing in Flugel and collecting syllables. Now Jabril saw this and squinted as if peering into bright light, because this proved they had faith in Flugel. Haha, this is fun! As the two rolled as if dancing in midair, their laughs resounded throughout Havenheim. Two wings, one fate. The idiom crossed Jabril's mind, but even that was not right. She felt it. She shook her head. What she was witnessing was not two wings, one fate, in the figurative sense of being very close. It was the two one-winged birds of the expression's original, literal meaning, she was sure. A male and a female, each with one eye and one wing, who always flew together. These fantastic animals are flying before us at this very moment, are they not? Jabril stared at them as if dazzled, but Ezreal, looking on, bored, still did not grasp what it meant. Seeing this, Jabril inquired quietly, "Elder, do you know the reason I oppose the sharing act? Because you're too serious and don't like others touching your stuff? No, it is because I enjoy reading the same books many times." That was news. Ezreal considered her questioningly. "What for? Who needs them once you've memorized them?" "Yes, I knew this is what you would say, and that is why I had not spoken of it." Jabril sighed, and then, apparently steeling herself, said, "Even after one has read a book, when one returns after learning more outside of it, there are new discoveries to be found. What bothered me was being unable to read them whenever I wanted. Do you not see?" "See what?" "If you only memorize the contents, it ends there." Jabril lowered her eyes at this statement, yet Ezreal still seemed confused, not comprehending Jabril's insight. Yes, but more critically, "So what does that have to do with this?" The look Jabril gave her was terribly pained. It was not a look of scorn or derision. It was a look rather of disappointment, of falling deeper and deeper every time a faint hope was once again cut down. Ezreal couldn't answer her sister's hopes. That, more than anything else, stabbed her keenly. "What are you saying? What's the problem?" High in the sky of Adventheim rushed a silver trail. Sora and Shiro had already left the sound barrier far behind. By now, there was no one who could catch up. "Well, as long as we don't let our guard get down, we're pretty much safe from getting caught." Sora muttered this as he held hands with Shiro and buzzed through the night sky. Yet, "But what about the syllables?" "Yeah, I know. If we're going to play this game, we ought to beat it with a full collection of syllables. Plus," nodding at Shiro's words, Sora pulled his expression together, "I already know the word I want to shoot into her." "Her? Of whom do you speak?" Plum asked, but Sora didn't answer. He just turned his back. It was nice they had lost him with their speed, but to collect the syllables, they'd have to get close, which meant a risk of getting caught, and on top of that, they were facing Flugel. Also, Sora admonished himself internally, don't forget, this game was unexpected. Blank didn't have the home field advantage. No matter how mindful they were of risks, there was no way they could guard against everything. Interesting. Sora chuckled, unheard. Excellent. This was what made it worth playing. So they'd have to minimize the risks by collecting as many syllables as possible at once. If they buffed up their insurance, that is, the power of the words, they'd be in a better position. But then Sora looked back to see a gleaming ray. Sora raised a questioning voice at the light. Eric? Sora responded a fraction of a second faster to precisely what he'd just been anticipating. He swung himself down, breaking out their axis into a curving roll without changing their course. Excuse me? What are you... Yeah. Cut and plumb short, a flash shot past, along their former axis. It had been a split-second decision. The incredible evasive action encouraged Shiro to praise her brother, but before she could... Jibril, what the hell was that? We didn't hear about this. They can attack us? Sora, previously so composed, was now shouting furiously. Above his head, Ponk, a little Jibril, her head about a quarter of her height, appeared and announced, No, Master, that was not an attack. It was a homing capture spell. Don't you mean a missile? No, it is perfectly non-lethal. The spell merely serves to bind the target and pull it in. Considering this and its purpose of capture rather than destruction, its concept is quite different from that of a missile. In your tearing his hair in response to Jabril's cluelessness, Sora howled. Okay, I'll rephrase that. We didn't hear anything about projectiles. Can't we fire back, Plum? Please don't talk crazy. I'm dual casting is Elf's patented specialty. If I use any more magic than this, I'll shrivel up. Never mind that. Your neck has already turned into a wrinkly mess, sir. So, what if it's wrinkly? You want some cold sweat? I've got a shit ton down my back right now, so lick it up. Really? Don't mind if I do. With an irritated tongue click at Plum, who seamlessly switched tracks from weepy to happy voice, Sora looked back. It's an away game, so be ready for anything. That's what he'd been thinking. And now look. Sure, the Flugel had said that there would be no shifting, but no one ever said there would be any magic. Damn it. How could I miss that? Should have thought about it. Rules paving a way to victory just by employing the right word were all too favorable. Seeing what they'd missed, Sora and Shiro regretted it more and bit her nails. The catch in the rules, the wording. They depended on her to remember every word so they could catch it. Shiro tormented herself as Sora rubbed her head. We're playing by ear here. What do you expect? Anyways, now's not the time. A game had been sprung on them without adequate information. It was only natural unforeseen circumstances would arise. They'd win anyways. How quickly they'd adapt and take control of the situation, that was the quintessence of blank. There was no time to grieve. Jibril, how many of those can they fire? Good question. It depends on the individual, but shall we say 6 or so? Well, that'll be a pain, but I guess with just 6, they're not going to waste them, so... Oh no, Master. Reflected in Sora's backward-facing eyes, a multitude of shadows that had gathered on the cubes. Flugel could be seen raising their hands, and the night sky was bathed the color of day. I meant they can launch 6 or so at once. There is no limit. I was a fool to hope for a second that you freaks had limits. Brother, let's go. This time Shiro was quicker on the trigger, flapping her wing hard. Promptly, Sora left the mini Jibril behind in silent pursuit. The missiles veered towards them in complex curves. But if Jibril had been right that they were homing... Shiro gave her wing a big flap, grasping her intent from her hand in his. Sora followed suit. Even the word of acceleration was insufficient to best the speed of the countless incoming rays. But the instant the beams were at their backs, a chandelle, banking at 45-degree angle from their level flight and looping diagonally upwards, they revved up their speed and climbed. The capture beams, perhaps proximity-triggered, came within a hairbreadth when the sibling speed dipped fractionally at the start of their incline. The rays flashed behind them and detonated. Hiya! Outplacing Plum's shriek, Shiro cancelled the chandelle they'd started. Instead of turning, she gave her wing one more flap, adding more speed to their ascent and breaking away from the light that exploded behind them. They'd survived, but allowing no time for self-congratulations, more beams pelted them, one after the other. Sora and Shiro drew them all in and flipped them off with exactly the same maneuver they just executed, but this time with a sharp descent, a slicing turn diagonally downwards. Again, by the same method, they shook off the barrage that detonated at their heels and used their speed. Yeah! Plum, who maintained their wings, squealed as those wings, still operating at ultra-high speeds, abruptly stopped. The barrel roll wrapped them around beams bursting at close range, one by one as they evaded. But as the light came in wave after wave, now the siblings' wings flapped to break. On a knife's edge of control, they dove into a thin crack between cubes, and immediately, countless explosions and beams burst around the entrance. Yes, homing missiles could be guided, while the job of calculating the ray's trajectory so they could be shaken off fell to Shiro. The series of maneuvers, worthy of Macra's missile massacre, gave her cold sweats and made her pant wildly. Her expression said that this was her penance for missing that no one had mentioned magic. Shiro felt weighted by the responsibility to the extent that, even after pulling this off, she looked guilty. "That's my Shiro. Your brother's so proud of his sister," Sora said, stroking her while cruising in a vertical orientation through the narrow passage. But, I hate this. I'm done with this game. If you keep this up, I'm not going to last. How much of a load had been placed on their wings, on Plum, to support these maneuvers? It could be gleaned from Plum's wail that it was close enough to her breaking point. Also, Sora thought, breaking into a cold sweat of his own, once they'd slipped out of this crack, without a doubt a horde of Flugel would be waiting for them. Considering the adaptability the Flugel had demonstrated thus far, they were unlikely to let this chance slip. "Brother, I can't." Yes, and this time they'd definitely be anticipating invasive action. The capture beams would surely come thick and staggered, homing in on them one after the other. Even with Shiro, there was no way they could dodge them all, and worse, Plum probably couldn't take much more. In that case, Sora and Shiro looked down at their wrists. All they had were their words, but the only syllables they held were ro, por, bar, ve, di, and pete, and tit. Nothing for this situation. They cursed to themselves in their frenzy. In a matter of seconds, they'd emerged from this tight corridor. In a few moments, they'd either have to evade the imminent beams or find a word. Defeat. "No, brother, I'm sorry." The first word that popped into Shiro's head slipped out by accident, and she disavowed it in panic. But in fact, that was the word that seemed most plausible under the circumstances. How were they supposed to defend with these syllables? Words like evade, armor, reflect, they didn't have all the syllables for any of them. How to turn it around from here? How to turn it around? As Sora ground his teeth, his head spun as if it would burn up. Just 7 fragments of words, all lacking application. A word that would turn this around. Turn it around. No. It's our job to turn thoughts around, isn't it? Huh? Shiro reacted quizzically to Sora's audible epiphany. That instant, different variables interlocked like gears in Sora's mind and started turning. Jabril's words. The capture spell triggered by proximity. That speed. It outstripped the Flugel, and even Sora's group couldn't shake it off. And when he saw that light emitting, when the cogs meshed, Sora laughed. "Why do we have to dodge? This is our chance!" "Shiro, up!" "What?" If they flew out into the open sky, they'd be targets for the capture beams, but Plum was alone in lamenting Sora's suggestion. Shiro had a different reaction altogether. "Roger that." They'd soar up. That was her brother's conclusion. Shiro needed no more convincing than that. Maintaining their ridiculous speed, they flew up the corridor, and shot out. Sure enough, a rain of light that lit up the night rained down on them. "Ow, ow, 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 wah! Yeah! Ah!" Non-lethal though this Flugel though this Flugel might have been, if they were caught, the game would be over, and their means of collecting the information they needed to determine the conditions to wake the Siren's Queen. For fear of these two things, Plum shrieked, but ignoring her, Sora saw what he'd expected and boldly cleared 2 syllables from his wrist to form a word. When the Flugel's capture beams were launched, Sora had glimpsed where the beams had originated. The ground. Indeed, the Flugel had just fired the barrage that were hurtling towards them when the siblings abandoned the corridor, without a single exception. Every last one of them stood with their feet planted on the cubes. The Flugel couldn't fire without landing, which meant Sora and Shiro didn't have to dodge. Amidst the barrage of light, Sora grabbed the cube immediately outside of their exit. Slamming the word he had composed onto the floor, he screamed, "Rotate!" A moment's lag, and then, ignoring all physical laws irresistibly, instantly, Adventheim itself spun horizontally. Huh? Not just Plum, but all the Flugel who had launched the capture beams erupted in shock. No, even those above, and Jabril watching remotely, voiced their surprise. What would happen if the stage itself were spun horizontally? Everything in the air, such as the capture beams and the Flugel flying through them, would stay as they were, while the Flugel's high-volume screams reverberating in a Doppler effect, everyone on the stage with their feet on the ground, namely the Flugel snipers, Sora and Shiro, would abruptly swap positions. Eek! And the beams would be impossible to dodge by the very folks who fired them, descending all of the sudden before their eyes, wouldn't they? As Sora smiled, only Shiro could see his mouth was tense. To spin Adventheim, unless you've got to spin on precisely the point you imagined, it would just mean the beams would nail you from a different direction. His was a smile of victory, born of a risky gamble. But if the capture beams operated as Jabril described... Shiro! Sora prodded without missing a beat, and Shiro promptly grasped his intent and responded, "Syllables. 23. Yes, the capture beams were just as Jabril described. So if a spell that bound its targets and pulled them back to its point of origin activated from a reversed position... Aye! Hey, wait! Eek! It would drag a gaggle of helpless Flugel right to Sora and Shiro. Do it, Shiro! Indeed, perfectly as Sora had wanted, they'd taken the minimum, that is to say, only one risk. And from the 38 Flugel hauled towards them, they would harvest 23 syllables. Arc, strict, till, dis, k, dolkt, pit, on, or, dis, necht, hood, mine, min, with, scour, comp, and re. But, brother! Shiro raised an alarm. Trussed up in all manner of poses from their surprise, 38 Flugel were delivered right to their doorstep. But Sora and Shiro didn't know how long the binding lasted, and the only one who knew where the syllables were was Shiro. Collecting their prizes so rapidly from 23 Flugel would have been too much. But Sora grinned instantly. First for rating purposes, vapor! The word vapor explosively covered the throng in steam, but still not finished. Breaking into a giddy leer, Sora fired off a follow-up to his word. Gesturing grandly to the audience before him, ignoring the sarcastic glare from Shiro, who knew what her brother was up to, while the siblings beat their wings hard to launch into high-speed flight. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. Bear! The raiment of the awkwardly posed Flugel, still immobilized by the capture beams, dispersed all at once, making it possible for Sora to spot where the syllables were positioned. 2. Sora, with a very grateful smile, closed his eyes and gave thanks. Oh, I can see now, Shiro. I can see so many things. Brother, take left. I'll take right. Oh, entrust it to me, my darling sister. Yuck! Roar with thunder. Oh, left hand of mine! The sister's eyes were cold enough to leave elementary particles in 0-point motion, while the brother's eyes blazed hot enough to vaporize a magnetic field. If temperature gradients between eyes were as effective as matters of physics, the planet would most likely have been blanketed by a typhoon. But fortunately, eek! All that blanketed the area was a chorus of 23 moans. Sora would have liked to stay and listen a bit longer, but he and Shiro burst through it in an instant, leaving the symphony in their dust. How do I put this? You work so fast. I just can't believe you. Please feel free to praise me unreservedly, Plum. Brother, you are a parsec gross. I just got the snack delivered in astronomical units. Don't you know how hard your brother worked for that? Flawlessly, Sora plucked 11 syllables, Shiro 12. Having also indulged in a bit of extraneous physical contact, Sora boasted loathsomely, only to be bluntly chastised by his sister. Sora was obviously stung by his sister's assessment that he was approximately 3.26 light years worth of disgusting, but Shiro didn't stop there. Brother, you wasted 3 syllables. Hey there, my sister, enough with your jokes. Wasted, you say? What nonsense! With a smile so exaggerated it would make an American uncomfortable, Sora went tut-tut-tut. In fact, there were 3 noble aims behind my actions: to collect the syllables to inhibit pursuit by provoking their reluctance to fly nude, and most important of all... Then, a beat, and with an exceedingly serious expression, Sora declared, the will of the cosmos. You mean the will of you? As Shiro corrected her brother, her voice was as cold as ever. Plum shouted a warning as she noticed something closing on them from behind. Wah! They're coming at us, regardless of being totally naked? Brother, Flugel, have no shame. Just like Jabril. What? I never expected that. Looks like they're coming from ahead, too, huh, Shiro? No syllables. Shiro responded with a sulk. A few nude Flugel advanced from behind, having shrugged off the capture spell, 3 approaching from the front, too. Deliberately fixing his gaze on the Flugel ahead of them and promptly positioning his camera, Sora spelled a word. As 3 extended their hands towards them, he and Shiro dodged gracefully, and he slammed the word in. Adulthood feet, that is. At the same time, he flapped his wing to swing around, covered Shiro's eyes with the wing, and turned his camera. Now they should hold him back for us. The closed Flugel started squeezing the breast of the nude Flugel, restraining them. At last, I've succeeded in witnessing the peach blossom spring with my own 2 eyes. It is truly marvelous. How unfortunate that it's night time. I wonder if my camera is getting this all right. Sir, I've almost come all the way back around to respecting you. Endless life, joyful, almost as if laughing at risk. Her 2 lords danced through the sky, yet someone was watching this display, still showing no sign of comprehension. Jabril sighed for the umpteenth time at Azrael, who continued to do nothing but frown. It looked as if her masters were going to win, but there was no meaning in that itself. If Azrael still failed to grasp anything, would it not betray the expectations of her masters? Elder, why do you not understand? Will you yet command our race to end themselves? Shall all of us die because of you alone? Jabril's words, smudged darkly with tension, meant nothing to Azrael. Why should Flugel fear death? Since when was this a feeling Flugel had? And to fear not even for her own sake, but for the others? Can you see the faces of my masters, see the faces of our people, yet see nothing? If your thick-headedness seals away their possibilities and puts all of the 6,000 years to waste, please get it. They will go to waste, because of you. On the verge of tears, Jabril forced out this accusation, and yet, Azrael still didn't get it. What was so... Can't catch up to them. Cut them off. We'll bring the capture spells to them by crossfire. Once they exhaust their syllables, we'll have our chance. What? But they're just gonna dodge it, I'm sure. We'll try it, and if it doesn't work, we'll think of something different, right? Let's go. As the Flugel conferred that while darting about, for some reason, all of them, unconditionally reserved, smiled. What was so entertaining? Anticipating the crossfire, Sora and Shiro once more flipped their wings, dropping and dodging expertly, just as predicted. "Oh, look, I told you they'd dodge it." "Then we'll just have to shoot them from above and below at the same time. Everyone disperse. Fire together on my command." "Yes." What was so entertaining? How could they chase an opponent they couldn't beat with smiles like those? Seeing Israel irritated by her own inability to understand, Jiro dropped some wisdom. "Elder, do you remember my spoils?" "I remember everything, all the achievements of my sweet little sister." She looked down, distantly, somewhere far in the past, and smiled. 19 joint kills of Gigants, 1 individual kill. 3 joint kills of Dragonians, 1 individual kill. The Dragonian head enshrined under the giant tree at the outskirts of Aventine had been Jiril's prize. Slaying a Dragonian alone was a feat that no one had achieved before or since. It had been Israel, in celebration, who had placed the skull, dressed it up, and 3 joint kills of Phantasmas, 1 individual kill. Likewise, only one had ever slain a Phantasma single-handedly, Jibril. Azrael's smile as she reminisced was unclouded, unaffected. The last created, racking up such spoils in only 245 battles, and returning home alive. How could I forget? Azrael recalled that faraway, nostalgic, beautiful time, a time that had a future, with a placid smile, prompting Jibril, not quite able to raise her eyes, to ask, "Then, do you remember the number of times I sustained injuries sufficient to require a rite of restoration?" 160. No hesitation. Jibril had caused her worry, always returning home on the brink of death. "Almost all of those instances were when you took enemies on alone. A Gigant, a Dragonian, and a Phantasma, one of each. Jibril, having slain members of 3 higher races single-handedly, had actually been beaten back the same number of times she had been victorious, multiplied by 25. And what that meant! This fact, being completely unfathomable to Israel, caused Jibril to grind her teeth. "All right. Do you understand why I insisted on slaying them alone?" Jibril's strong undertone indicated that this was the final hint. Her voice was resolute, mixed with hope and the fear that hope would once more be betrayed. But Azrael could only shake her head. "Honestly, I never know what you're going to do, Jibs. To begin with, they were impossible opponents. Indeed, no one was supposed to be able to defeat an opponent of a higher rank without assistance. The Flugel had not been created with such abilities in mind. This was the end. If Azrael didn't understand that, that is why I proved you wrong." "I don't get it. What are you on about? What did you see in them, Jibs?" Jibril had no words to respond. That is to say, Jibril had lost all hope. The hope she'd held, that if she understood it, everyone else should be capable, too, crumbled. Her sister's despair stabbed Israel with unbearable pain. But, "Jibs, you're special." "You don't know this, Jibs, but Lord Artosh gave you something special. That's why you cannot comprehend things the rest of us can't." As Jibril stood mutely, Azrael spelled out an earnest appeal. "I want to know the answer, too. I don't want it to end here. Because then what will these 6,000 years have meant? But I just don't get it. I can't go on lying any longer." Azrael, the first Flugel, created first by Artosh with the goal of perfection. Crying was not a feature she had been given, but perhaps because they were alone, Azrael's voice, pleading, poured out for the first time with wet sincerity. "I'm begging you, anyone, tell me. What are we living for? Why are we still alive? What are we looking for? What do we have to find in order to have lived? Tell me." Jibril listened to this silently, but deliberately, as if pushing Azrael away, and the voice, without heed. She conveyed what Azrael needed to hear. Yes, the words her masters would have chosen. "And so you use your limits as an excuse to use me. You and I, and all of us who have survived, lost, and we have lived for 6,000 years as losers." Jibril turned her eyes away from Azrael, hands trembling. "That, from this, You have learned nothing, speaks not one of us possessed of an exceptional nature, but rather to your own indolence. Jabril tightened her fists. Though she had nearly died any number of times, she had never been as nervous as now, she realized. She recomposed her expression. Don't let your voice shake. Don't let your eyes wander. She forced all the spirits that comprised her body into submission, and brought them under her control. Could she? Doubt assailed her, but she cast it off. Do or do not. That's what she learned. Chewing over her lessons from her masters, she did as she had learned from them. It did not come naturally to Jabril, but she decided to take a gamble. Masters, please forgive the incompetence of your lowly servant, Jabril, on whom you have been forced to rely to the end. So she whispered to herself, and she summoned the last of her hope. Even so, allow me to put my faith in the faith you have shown me. And so, with an expression that was, to the mightiest degree imaginable, contemptuous, she spat. So feeble-minded are you that I can only despise you from the bottom of my heart, you heap of trash. For the first time in her 6,477-year life, she bluffed. All color drained from Ezreal's face, and a tired voice rang out quietly. I'm so over this. And then the world trembled. Oh, thank God that's over. I'm going to be honest, I didn't record this in one session, and this ran a lot longer than I thought. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm going to split up chapters from now on. This is going to be one upload on Wednesday, and you're not going to get one on Friday. You're going to get another one on Monday, not one Friday. I mean, unless something happens. Well, that was pretty interesting, them being able to skate through these problems, proving not just their intelligence and their cooperation, but just how flexible they are. They really are the masters of every game. And I come to wonder sometimes how they would treat games in the real world, assuming they were real in themselves. Well, anyways, with all of this out of the way and this massive reading session over, thank you for listening. Thank you for returning back, and thank you for liking or subscribing if you do. Honestly, it feels weird to say that. I don't know if I'll say that every time. I don't like nagging people, but at the same time, I want more people to be able to find this stuff. I really do. And I'm sure some people want to listen to these stories. So, hey, if you're out there and you can, just do whatever you can, man. Tell your friends if they like audiobooks too. Subscribe if you think it'll help. If you don't. Like, I'm not going to force you to do that. And I suppose I'll see you guys next time. Bye.